in the name under the spotlight for decades, choose to speak out all because of one love, not because of the stage lights, not because of the applause, but simply because of a gaze, a promise, and a love that has remained intact, untouched by time. Something Sam Elliott has silently kept in his heart throughout his life. Before the story unfolds, what do you think is the one word that truly describes Sam Elliott? An actor, an icon, or something more? A presence? A quality? That when he speaks, you feel an emotional connection deep within? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes it's your emotions, as the one following this story, that provide the final piece to complete this tale. I was focused on coming to California when I was like 9 years old. Before Sam Elliott became a familiar face on Hollywood screens, few could have imagined that his childhood began with more silence than words, and more stern looks than comforting gestures. His journey did not start with encouragement or praise, but with strict rules and expectations that were never explained. From that quiet space, a resilient and introspective Sam Elliott gradually emerged, carrying a deep yearning to be understood, to be recognized, and to live true to himself. Born on August 9, 1944, in Sacramento, California, Sam was the only child in a household where responsibility was valued, more than affection, and duty outweighed encouragement and emotional sharing. His father, Henry Nelson Elliott, was a wildlife control specialist, a stern man whose eyes always seemed to scrutinize and whose words rarely carried softness. His mother, Glynn Mamie, a physical training instructor and high school teacher, was gentler but still bound by cold discipline and strict standards. At the age of 13, the family relocated to Portland, Oregon, a place where the wild landscape seemed to offer emotional healing, yet in reality only deepened the silence between Sam and his father. Amid the trees and endless afternoons, Sam fell in love, not with a person, but with the world of silent, stoic characters on screen. Men who spoke through their eyes and stood strong in silence, the very archetypes he longed to become. By age 9, Sam already knew he wanted to be an actor, not to be famous, but to embody those quiet yet powerful souls he admired. But in his household, such dreams were forbidden. To his father, art was frivolous, acting was foolish, and ambition in that direction was an illusion not fit for a proper son. Whenever Sam revealed his aspirations, they were harshly dismissed, as if even speaking of them was a shameful mistake. After graduating from David Douglas High School in 1962, Sam tried to follow his father's wishes and enrolled at the University of Oregon, majoring in English and psychology, but his heart was never in it. The dream of the stage quietly burned within him like a flicker of light against the cold. He soon dropped out and enrolled again at Clark College in Vancouver, completing a 2-year program. There, he first stepped on stage as Big Jewel in Guys and Dolls, and the Vancouver Columbian wrote that he should pursue acting professionally. His father never knew, and perhaps even sensing it, would only have deepened the sadness in his heart, not out of disappointment, but from the pain of a father-son distance too great to bridge. Sam never got to say what he truly felt. They never reconciled, and then his stern, distant father, who perhaps deep down had always loved him quietly, passed away suddenly from a heart attack when Sam was just 18. There was no farewell hug, no words of forgiveness, just a silence that would echo forever, a wound that never healed in the heart of a son who had only wanted to be seen. Time and again, Sam longed to tell his father that all he needed was to be heard. A gentle nod, a look of understanding, but the words always got stuck, never dared to leave his lips. He kept it all inside, afraid that voicing it would shatter what fragile love remained. Even when Sam rose to Hollywood fame, even when his gravelly voice became unmistakable across America, deep down he still carried the shadow of a boy left behind in unspoken silence. And perhaps it was that very wound, that unresolved silence, that quietly propelled him toward acting. A world where he could finally speak, be heard, and most importantly, exist on his own terms. After a text after I'd rapped, and Bradley said, "What do you think about this?" And I thought, holy shit. After years marked by silent wounds and emotional distance, Sam Elliott stepped out of the shadows and onto a path that was never easy. The very path he had once been forbidden to take, even ridiculed for, the path of acting. After the death of his father, Sam made one final attempt to return to the University of Oregon, as if trying to hold on to what he thought he should do, instead of what he truly longed for. But with each passing class, he felt more disconnected from himself, as though he were living a life that belonged to someone else. Just a few months later, he walked away, no longer uncertain, no longer bound. He left Oregon for Los Angeles, alone, in silence, carrying a heart weighed down by grief, but still burning with hope. That morning, his mother stood by the old window, hands clasped tightly, as if trying to hold back all the words she could not say. Her eyes, neither urging nor stopping him, simply followed him, as if memorizing the silhouette of her son, stepping across a threshold he would never cross back. Those first days in Los Angeles were nothing like what Sam had imagined. The city was no promised land. It was a battlefield for a nameless dreamer with nothing but hope and a few crumpled bills in his pocket. He worked construction jobs during the day, lived in a narrow rented room, and attended acting classes at night, quietly, persistently, unnoticed. Despite endless auditions and countless rejections, he never gave up. His early roles were shadows on the screen, nameless, voiceless, quickly forgotten. But to Sam, even the smallest part was proof that he belonged somewhere beyond the shadows. In 1969, his first real break came with a tiny role in the classic Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Just a silent card player in the background, barely on screen, but for Sam, it was everything. It marked the first time he stepped into the world he had long dreamed of. Nearly a decade later, in 1978, he would reunite with actress Catherine Ross in The Legacy, a film that not only advanced his career, but quietly began the love story that would define the rest of his life. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Sam slowly carved out his place, with recurring roles in television series like Mission, Impossible, Gunsmoke, and Hawaii 5.0. He chose not to chase flashy stardom, but instead followed a quieter, deeper path, growing his signature mustache and long hair, embracing a presence that couldn't be mistaken for anyone else. Roles like Tel Sackett in The Sacketts, Gar in Mask, and Wade Garrett in Roadhouse showed a man who wasn't just skilled, but who carried a profound emotional gravity. Sam didn't need grand speeches. His silence spoke volumes. By the 1990s and 2000s, he had become a familiar face in many iconic films. The righteous Virgil Earp in Tombstone, the philosophical stranger in The Big Lebowski, and the commanding Lieutenant Colonel Plumley in We Were Soldiers, each role proved the same point. Sam didn't just act. He lived within each character. Then came 2018, a moment of long overdue recognition. In A Star Is Born, Sam portrayed Bobby, the quietly tormented older brother. It was a performance of restraint, heartbreak, and depth that moved both critics and audiences alike. At age 74, he received his first Oscar nomination, not just as an actor, but as a symbol of unwavering commitment to the craft. Beyond the screen, Sam Elliott's voice had become an icon in itself, from the unforgettable campaign, Beef, It's What's for Dinner, to animated films like The Good Dinosaur and series like Family Guy and American Dad. His gravelly baritone entered American homes and memories alike. But behind that familiar sound, is a man who, well into his later years, continues to live with quiet reflection, facing the slow transformations of time, the quiet losses and the empty spaces that fame cannot fill. And perhaps it is in this soft fading of the spotlight that a new chapter, quieter, deeper, has quietly begun. Put the water on and watch the house behind us burn to the ground. There are pains that never make it to the screen, never written in biographies or captured in frames of celebrated films. Yet they exist silently, like a deep scar etched in the heart, lasting a lifetime. For Sam Elliott, that pain wasn't from a forgotten role or fading spotlight, but from wounds that quietly began at home, where love and expectation sometimes moved in opposite directions, leaving a distance that would never be fully bridged. There are turning points that require no tragedy or tears to leave a lasting impact. Sometimes a single moment of silence is enough to change the course of a life. For Sam Elliott, that moment came not from a dramatic script, but from a quiet afternoon at 18, when he unexpectedly lost his father, a man he had never truly understood, a man he never had the chance to reconcile with. Pain perhaps is easier to bear when one is given the final word, a goodbye. But Sam had no such luxury. His father, who had long doubted his pursuit of acting, passed away without a parting conversation, leaving behind an unresolved silence that lingered. What tormented Sam wasn't the opposition, but the helplessness of never being able to prove to his father that art too was a noble path, a choice worthy of integrity, courage, and sincerity. For years afterward, amidst the glittering applause of Hollywood, Sam quietly wondered if his father had lived to see it all. Would he have felt proud hearing his son's name among the greats? In the aftermath of that loss, Sam returned to university, trying to convince himself he could still live an ordinary life, but grief, still raw, led him to leave once more. Twice he set aside his education, not out of lack of will, but because the soul of a young man, lost in emotional aftershocks, found the world distant and unclear. He walked between two realms, the weight of unfinished expectations and the fragile flame of a passion still unnamed. And then, somewhere along the search for recognition and forgiveness from his past, Sam arrived at another turning point, one that required his wounded heart to have a conversation with itself. After nearly 2 decades of quiet perseverance and steadily proving himself through unforgettable supporting roles, Sam Elliott had become a respected name in the industry. From Gunsmoke and Mission, impossible to iconic westerns, he never needed noise to stand out. He chose quiet sincerity, and it made its mark. That same persistence led him to greater opportunities, and among them was one he later admitted was a turning point in his life: the film Mask. Not only did it elevate his career to new heights, Mask was where he stood beside Cher, a woman with an unreadable gaze, a unique presence, and a soul weathered by layers of emotion. Amidst the chaos of the set and the heat of the lights, there were moments when Sam felt they had stepped beyond the script, into a space of unspoken understanding, where two hearts shaped by hurt found themselves resonating on the same emotional frequency. Sam, a man who had long carried familial wounds and youthful doubts, found in Cher more than a scene partner. He saw a soul that had stumbled, endured, yet carried herself with poise and quiet power. There weren't many words, no dramatic offset moments, but a look of knowing in her eyes, a gentle touch, during a scene or a moment where Sam slowed his steps before leaving the set. They raised the question, was it just acting or something more elusive? It might have been a different chapter, an untold story, if not for Catherine, the woman who walked beside him when he was still a name unknown, the first to see the quiet depth within him, the flicker of a flame not yet noticed by Hollywood. And that unwavering love kept him grounded from something fragile but real. After all the lights and silent glances, Sam returned, not with denial, not with explanation, but with dignified silence. Sometimes the most beautiful feelings are meant to remain within the bounds of respect. In a world quick to expose the private, whatever existed between Sam and Cher, whatever it was, became a memory like mist, haunting, delicate, as soft as twilight, and never crossing the line of loyalty. And perhaps that silence is the strongest affirmation of all. Some connections are too sacred to be named, but forever live on as quiet echoes in the hearts they've touched. Sam is that kind of man, never needing to raise his voice to make a point. His silence speaks of a heart that has loved deeply, endured greatly, and still chooses to protect what is sacred, with proud restraint and unspoken fidelity. Time waits for no one, and for Sam Elliott, once the stoic symbol of the American West, the marks of age grew more visible with each passing year. In every public appearance, his steps slowed, his eyes more reflective, each movement weighted with the grace of memory. Whispers spread that Sam might be facing a serious health issue, a fear that touched the hearts of his admirers, especially after his moving portrayal of an aging man worn by time in The Hero. The performance was so real, so painfully believable, that many questioned whether it was truly just a role. It was heartbreaking to think that a man who once embodied strength was now cloaked in rumors. And yet, what made him even more admirable was his refusal to address them. He chose to keep walking as though nothing had changed. In that role, Sam portrayed a Western legend facing solitude and an unspoken diagnosis, and his performance was so raw, many couldn't tell where the character ended and the real man began. As rumors grew, Sam stayed silent, as if allowing the world to believe whatever it wished, so long as he could continue on his artistic path. In truth, Sam had suffered a foot injury that required him to wear a corrective shoe during recovery, but he never treated it as something that needed explaining. No clarifications, no statements, only steady work, unwavering presence. That is the quiet strength of a man who has lived through loss, stood at emotional crossroads, and ultimately chosen resilience as a way of life. In 2012, Sam quietly said goodbye to his beloved mother, the woman who had watched him rise from a dream-filled boy to a cinematic icon. There were no grand ceremonies, no lengthy tributes, just Sam, as always reserved, silent, holding his grief the same way he had held his career with enduring strength. After her passing, Sam quietly took over the family home in Portland, not as an inheritance, but as a living memory forever tied to his heart. The house remains untouched, echoing with the simple sounds of childhood and unfinished conversations with a mother who always believed in him. Each year he returns not to live, but to remember the soft-spoken guidance of a kind mother, the crisp Oregon mornings, and the fleeting comfort of feeling like a child again. And perhaps it is in those silent returns that something enduring was forged in him, a life lived with simplicity, like a glowing ember that continues to warm the memory of generations, making people pause, not in awe, but in quiet reverence for a soul who lived faithfully, patiently, and with profound humanity. I was focused on coming to California when I was like 9 years old, long before the world knew her name, and even longer before people believed they would be together forever. Sam Elliott already knew she was the greatest love of his life, and not in a fleeting cinematic way, but in the deepest, most enduring connection that one soul could ever feel for another. Catherine Ross was not just a co-star, not merely a companion on screen. She was the still point in a world that constantly spun and shifted. When they reunited on the set of The Legacy in 1978, something nameless yet undeniable found its rightful place. Sam, still an actor trying to carve his path, saw in Catherine a woman who had lived many lives through marriages, fame, and heartbreaks, yet still carried a graceful beauty and a presence so dignified it left him quietly in awe. What few knew was that his heart had chosen her long before, from the very first time he saw her backstage years ago. Back then, Sam was just a face in the crowd, standing at a distance, quietly whispering to himself, "I'm no one. I couldn't possibly approach her." Nearly a decade would pass before fate allowed them to meet again in the Legacy. And when he finally dared to meet her gaze, he knew there would be no turning back. After working together on the Legacy in 1978, Sam and Catherine gradually grew close. 6 years later, in 1984, they married in a simple ceremony. No stage lights, no press coverage, and the birth of their only daughter, Cleo Rose, wasn't a planned milestone or a grand announcement, but a natural, gentle chapter in their quiet, unwavering journey together. But what made this love story extraordinary wasn't the wedding, nor the surface-level sparkle. It was all that came after. Through the peaks and valleys of their careers, through the silent years and the brilliant ones, they remained side by side with a loyalty so rare in the world of entertainment. Sam never let the spotlight dim his heart, nor any temptation shake the promise he once made. In a world where everything is fragile and fleeting, he chose to stay, and that choice became the greatest legacy of his soul. Even after decades together, when asked about their marriage, Sam never resorted to fancy words. He answered with his eyes, with a subtle nod, with the quiet presence that never left her side. "I used to dream of making it big, of becoming famous. But in the end, what makes me proudest isn't any golden statue. It's waking up each morning and seeing that she's still there." A simple, unadorned sentence, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of devotion and depth. "She is the love of my life," he once said, not with theatrics, but with the understanding of a man who knew that true love must be chosen again and again, every day, not just promised once. Today, Sam and Catherine still live quietly on their ranch in Malibu, far from the lights and noise of fame. Every morning they rise early, brew coffee together, and sit on the porch as sunlight filters through the old trees. Sometimes, Catherine gently places her hand on Sam's shoulder and softly says, "Cut back on the ice cream, love. I'm making your favorite stew tonight." These simple things, how they call each other, how they sit in silence, watching the evening sky, are the kind of love no Hollywood script could ever write. They tend the land, care for their animals, and more than anything, they care for one another. And in those moments, they are preserving something even more precious than fame. A love that was chosen, protected, and never compromised. The way they look at each other now is slower, softer, but deeper too, as if after all the highs and lows, just having each other is more than enough. Sometimes, the deepest declarations of love are not shouted on stage. They're whispered across the years through loyalty. And in that quiet whisper, Sam Elliott gave his most honest performance of all. But beyond this enduring love story, what truly makes Sam Elliott great is the way he lives, with quiet integrity, steadfast humility, and an unwavering spirit that never traded away his core values. In an industry where ego and glamour often reign, Sam chose a different path. He never chased the spotlight. He let his roles speak for him. Those who've worked with him describe him as punctual, honest, devoted, and kind. He proved that strength doesn't have to be loud. It only needs to be steady, and that true courage lies in quiet conviction, in presence so deep that others can't help but listen. To millions of viewers, just hearing Sam Elliott's voice is enough to feel comforted and grounded. It's more than ads or animated films. That deep, steady voice has become part of the American soundscape. In a noisy world, Sam Elliott still makes people pause. Not because he shouts, but because he speaks truth. Sam Elliott is not just an actor. He is a way of being. A man who walked through time without ever losing himself. An artist who never needed the spotlight but left behind a legacy that can never be replaced. That is why he is admired, respected, and remembered as one of the last moral icons of Hollywood. Whether riding horses in westerns or sitting quietly beside the woman he loves, Sam Elliott doesn't need to be called a star, because the way he lives has made him a monument, a reminder that kindness, patience, and authentic love can still endure, even in a world constantly changing. And perhaps the greatest legacy Sam Elliott leaves behind isn't just in his unforgettable roles, but in how he lived, how he loved, and how he quietly protected the most sacred values of a human soul. Never boasting, never explaining, he leaves Hollywood and all of America with a moral compass future generations can look to for how to live with heart. In an age of chaos and noise, Sam Elliott remains, grounded still, a monument that never had to be built because he's always simply been himself. A group of my peers, many of whom I don't even know. When the stage lights dim and the curtain falls, what lingers is not just the roles he played, but the way he lived. Sam Elliott walked through life the same way he appeared on screen, quietly, sincerely, and with unwavering grace. He never needed titles to become a legend, nor spotlight to be remembered. Just a faithful gaze, a promise never broken. That alone was enough to carve his name into the hearts of generations. In a world full of noise and constant change, Sam Elliott chose simplicity. He chose to love one person for a lifetime. He chose to live with quiet integrity, a principle he never once compromised. And perhaps the greatest legacy he leaves behind isn't found on a red carpet, but in the deep respect of a culture that honors a man who stayed true to what mattered most in his heart. What are your thoughts on Sam Elliott, the man who chose lifelong loyalty and lived with quiet kindness? We invite you to share your reflections with us, because tributes like these are how we preserve and protect what is beautiful and rare in this world.